Time-bound is the last concept in the SMART format. And in this lecture, I'm going to discuss several aspects of time-bound. I'm going to discuss action feedback loops and basically how you want to evaluate your progress. And I'm also going to discuss process and the importance of using those feedback loops as it relates to incentives or rewards. And I'm also going to discuss a psychological principle called the planning fallacy that you want to take into account when setting your goals. One challenge I see in goal setting is either the misuse or non-use of action feedback loops. For instance, if I'm trying to lose 20 pounds, how frequently should I get on the scale? Twice a day, once a week, once a month? The frequency, if it's not scheduled appropriately, can actually be demotivating. So you want to make sure that the feedback that you try to give yourself is not too frequent, and you want to make sure it's frequent enough to keep you on track and to keep you motivated. Now, when in doubt, err on the side of caution and make it shorter, more frequent. Research supports both in animals and humans that we prefer shorter, smaller feedback loops over longer, larger feedback loops. And the correct frequency of feedback cannot be understated, because you're going to use this feedback to review your performance, to evaluate, to make changes, to improve, almost like a continuous process improvement plan. Anyway, you also want to ensure that your feedback is tied to some sort of incentive to keep you motivated and on the right track. The last concept I want to talk about as it relates to goal setting and time is the planning fallacy. This is a psychological principle discovered by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. And what they found is we psychologically always overestimate what we can achieve. We underestimate the amount of time it's going to take. We underestimate the amount of resources it will require. In one study, they used students and how long it would take for them to complete a term paper. The average guess was 34 days. Then they asked the students if, under best case scenario, how long would it take them to complete? And the answer was 27.5 days. The worst case scenario was 48.5 days. Now, when the papers actually were turned in, turned out to be 55.5 days. Why? It's not like the students had never written a paper before. And determining how long it will take to write a paper is not something that you would believe is that hard to calculate. And it is not only individuals that the planning fallacy can affect. It can also influence groups. One of the best well-known examples is the Sydney Opera House in Australia. That project took 10 years longer than expected. And the initial budget in order to build the Opera House was $7 million. And the actual end result was $102 million. And it was even a scaled-down version. So why? How are we such horrible planners? Now, there are tons of theories available, too many to discuss in this short course, but I will touch on attribution theory. And this is where we attribute all of our success to actions that we've done, where we discount our failures and we blame it on external or things outside of our control. Now, as a psychologist, I find the planning fallacy fascinating. But what can you do about it? How can you use what we know about the planning fallacy to be better at achieving your goals? Well, there was some follow-up research, and that research showed that the number one thing you can do to counteract the fallacy is actually base your predictions, your time that you're setting your goals for, based on your actual past results. Now what I want you to do is take one or two goals and establish some action feedback loops. Consider the frequency at which you'll need to give yourself some feedback and some potential incentives. Consider how you're going to take that feedback and revise your goals moving forward. And also, consider your past performance. Try to counteract the planning fallacy.